Welcome to Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show we have a talk about Linux projects such as a distribution, desktop environment, or application. We also chat about any news or any variety of topics from the community. Anything that is Linux tech and open source related is on the table for discussion. I'm Nate, a Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the Open SUSE project. And with me today, I got a fantastic panel of people. I've got Sean, Dale, Adam Grubbs, Eric, good to see Eric, Jinda, Ben, Colin, good to see Colin, Shaston, and GNU to Linux. I don't know, must be a Linux fan. So welcome, everybody.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
How is everyone tonight?
Excellent.
In a heck of a mood.
It sounds like it. The that woohoo was very Slade, like the 80s band, or I guess 60s, 70s, 80s band like. So that was cool. So be sure to do the straw poll.
I am recovering from a long week without my meds. This is why I'm recovering very professionally.
You know, that was a HIPAA violation. You shouldn't share such things.
Oh, shoot. Shaston has joined us. Oh, shoot. I guess he's one of the few who didn't forget about the show.
Yeah.
I guess. So be sure to do that straw poll if you haven't done so already. It is how you would best describe your experience with PikaOS. And on the docket for today, we're going to talk about...
We didn't get to look at it.
Fantastic. So on the docket for today, we're going to talk about PikaOS. We're going to talk about the straw poll. But first, what have you been doing in Linux and tech? Adam, you've been telling about all kinds of really cool things that you got going on or that you've been doing that actually feel like way above anything that I would say I've ever done. Do tell about something about signing your own modules. Is that so? Yeah. So you're gonna have to explain this for because this intrigues me. But how does this actually? Okay, I guess first describe what you said. You at first asked me about secure boot, and so maybe explain a little bit about what secure boot is and why it's important.
So secure boot is I don't know. I guess it's part of the UEFI standard at this point, but it's basically a part of your firmware that is meant to load signed code that's like authorized code to verify that your boot process is valid, has not been tampered with, has not been nothing like untowards is being loaded, etc. Right? So normally the process is the firmware will load a shim. And the shim is usually signed by a trusted CA, usually Microsoft if you buy like a OEM machine or board. So I'm pretty sure most third-party boards would also have that one in there for the ease of installing Windows, right?
Right.
So this shim is like the bare part of it, and it has all the code in there to verify that the things that are about to be loaded into your machine, like loaded as the OS, the bootloader, all of the low-level stuff before loading an OS, is valid. So there's a separate part, and this is kind of what I'm working with. It's called MOK or MOK. It stands for machine owner keys, and this is basically a set of keys that the machine owner can load into their TPM, their secure boot chain, right?
Okay.
And so the idea is that when you load up a like in this case a Linux distro, I know we've probably all hit this before, loading usually a community-based distro. If you have secure boot on, guess what it does? It tells you no, right?
Right.
Usually you get like some angry red message about like, not authorized or not authenticated, whatever the silly message is depending on your maker. And the reason is that bootloader, grub, systemd, boot, whatever it might be, is not signed with the keys that are in your UEFI, usually stored in the TPM on your machine, whether it be a firmware TPM or hardware TPM. Basically, this shim has not signed to say that this is okay, right? So there's a sort of trust that's made where you have certificates and keys And the shim itself is basically a middleman for the Microsoft certificate authority, and anything assigned to that Microsoft certificate authority is then like seen as okay, right? So it passes its own key in and says like, hey, I like this device driver, this bootloader, this whatever I'm loading in the boot process is okay because Microsoft said it was okay. Now, when it comes to the machine owner keys, those are generally provided by obviously the machine owner, you, right? So in the case when you load up a distro that does not have any kind of signed thing, you get that error. But that's because the boot process has not been signed by anything that's been authorized by your UEFI, by the secure boot section, the secure boot process. So what you can do is you can enroll a self-signed key into your TPM, into your UEFI as an MOK, as a machine owner key. And that will allow you to then sign drivers and bootloaders and kernels and other things, the init-RDs or unified kernel images, whatever you're trying to boot from, whatever needs to be done in the boot process, that can be signed against your certificate. And as long as that certificate is stored in your TPM and as enrolled as an MOK, anything signed to it is good. Now, the problem is, if you have someone else's certificate signing it, or if it's generated by a script or whomever, you might either A, end up with somebody's malicious certificate, right? Or B, you might end up with a certificate you lose the key for, or whatever the issue might be, right? So how do you prevent people from spoofing it?
Yes.
Because that seems to be the key, right? Like it shouldn't, well, if anybody can sign a thing, then what does it matter? The key part is the MOK process doesn't just require you to enroll it from an OS perspective. Linux has a MOK util command that you can run to enroll keys. You can generate the keys with OpenSSL and then use them to sign. You can use those to use something like Arch has like SBCTL. A lot of things like DKMS for like dynamic kernel modules and AK mods and stuff can use these keys to sign drivers and modules that are built, because each kernel module you load in needs to also be signed, right?
Right.
And so you can sign these like dynamically when they're built. But to prevent malicious folks from doing that, to enroll a key, it requires you to assign a passphrase with a certain level of complexity, usually 8 characters, special character number, that kind of thing. And that has to be entered, and on the next reboot at the physical machine, the physical console of the machine has to be entered in. So the only way someone could compromise your stuff is if they sort of social engineered their way to physically be at your machine, in which case you might have another problem. Like you might have bigger problems if that's where they're at. And so what it allows you to do is so what I did is I created my own CA that I sign things with, my own certificate authority here at home, and I sign certificates and keys based on that CA. So then I take that key, I generate the key and the certificate off that CA. Then I use those certificates and keys to then sign my bootloader, sign my drivers, sign whatever it might be. And this was all prompted because I needed to install these like third-party Xbox controller drivers. Of course, it's always gaming driving everything, but so like
Is that a bad
to get
thing?
these to load with the UEFI secure boot enabled, they had to be signed. But I didn't want to just sign them with any random generated key. I didn't want to populate my TPM with random stuff. So I created a certificate and key pair with my own CA and signed it with that. And then, of course, used it to enroll that into it. And that prevents any random third-party folks from, if there's any malicious drivers or any kind of bootloader thing or any kind of weirdness that happens, it has to be re-signed every time anything is changed. So if the checksum of the thing changes, it needs to be re-signed. That's a simple thing to do when you do like a grub update or a system deboot update, or update the driver, right? These DKMS and others will do this for you to make it simpler. But if anyone else wanted to then run a malicious bootloader or driver or anything like that, they can't, because it just won't work. So in the case of this driver, this Xbox controller driver that I trust and then I know it's legit, if I don't sign it, it's not that the machine doesn't boot, it just doesn't load that kernel module. And if you try to mod probe it, sudo mod probe, whatever you want to do, it just won't, because it's not signed to the secure boot, to the UEFI. And so, go ahead. You look like you're gonna ask. I can't hear you, by the way.
Sorry, I have some questions on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so sometimes when I get an update from on Tumbleweed, I will get that when it reboots, that mock shim thing, and I didn't really look into what that was. I imagine it was a secure boot thing, and so I'm now wondering, like, why do I periodically get that? Is it when there's some major change in the security that OpenSUSE sent down?
To enroll a key? Is that what it's asking you?
It's actually saying, are you going to make a modification or whatever? Hit whatever key to make a modification as I'm booting up, or something along those lines. I don't know. I'd have to.
It's possible. So usually when enrolling a key, like a new key, then that would require you to physically actually enter a passphrase and stuff to enroll the key. If you have a key already in there, like you have a machine-owned key in there, it's possible I'm not really sure what that error would be. It's not making modifications. It might indicate that there are modifications to the boot process that have not been signed, right? So there might be modules that are not being loaded or something that's not, because if it's all signed, then you're golden.
All right, it says
something that will. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So actually, what happens? It says perform mock management. It's continue to boot, enroll mock, enroll key from disk, enroll hash from disk.
Right. So the enroll mock there, that if you select that, it's going to ask you to like view the key, and then it will ask you for a passphrase to then enroll that key. So there's something on your machine, some sign driver like NVIDIA or something like that OpenSUSE is trying to sign and trying to enroll a key for, and you have to physically type in that passphrase. When you hit like just continue and just ignore it, it just never enrolls that key. So whatever is being assigned by that key just never loads.
I always just say continue, and it always boots. So I think
so at some point something needed signing. Do you have like a third-party driver, NVIDIA, or anything that might have been on that machine? Any kind of DKMS thing you would have built? VirtualBox DKMS, or
I might have added it, but it all came from the official repositories. So I think it probably handled itself then.
In this case, I would, if I were you, I would probably find out what's actually asking for that, and then find out whether or not you want to enroll that key. And even if you did want to enroll that key, if you don't know the passphrase for that key, it's just not going to get enrolled.
Okay.
So like on Fedora, for example, in Fedora 42, you go into the GNOME Software Center and install the NVIDIA drivers. And they install, and then there's an enable button. And when you click that, they give you a 4-digit passphrase that they want you to use for that they generated a key for. They auto-generate a key, and they give you a 4-digit passphrase. And then when you reboot, it will bring up that mock enrollment thing, and you can go and type in that passphrase they gave it, and that will enroll their key that they generated for you to allow the NVIDIA drivers to run with Secure Boot enabled. But if you don't do that process, if you just hit continue, you will revert to nouveau because NVIDIA will not load.
Oh, okay.
Because it's not signed. And that's the idea of the secure boot thing, is to make sure that drivers and bootloaders, because when you sign these things, you sign grub, like let's say you're running grub, you sign grub, you sign the VM Linus, you sign the initRD, the whatever, unified kernel image if you use those. Like you sign everything that involves the boot process, including device drivers that are loaded, and those are allowed to load. So when you sign the kernel, because the kernel is monolithic, all of the drivers that come in the kernel are automatically signed when you sign the kernel, right? But any kind of third-party stuff, like out of tree stuff, like NVIDIA or whatever, VirtualBox drivers, this XPad Neo Xbox driver, those need to be signed, otherwise they won't load. Now I know most folks would probably think that's a pain, and I get that, because when on Windows, the driver, the Windows has the same system, right? So when you install a driver on Windows, if it's not signed by, like, if it's not a signed driver from the WHQL like official thing, the secure boot won't allow you to use that driver. It will just complain and just say no. And that's because it's not signed to Microsoft CA, which is where you get the driver signing from.
Okay.
And it can be signed with another key, but if you don't have that key enrolled in your machine, the machine doesn't know that key, and it'll just say no. And so the thing I did was create my own certificate authority so that I could sign multiple machines to the same authority using different keys and know that it's me and not someone else.
Right. And how is that presented to know that it's you? Does it actually have,
I know it's
like,
me because like the
Sir-
certificate details have my details in it.
okay, so it's like Sir Adam Grubbs of.
Yeah. Usually,
wherever.
like you have country, state. You've probably seen OpenSSL certs. You have country, state, city, your email address, whatever. Those details are in there.
Oh, okay.
Just the same as any other OpenSSL thing, and so that detail exists in the key, so I know it's me, right? And if I get like if I get a mock enrollment, I'm like, nice try, nope, not mine, and then I find out why that's happening.
Okay. So how easy would it be for somebody
that you don't know? Then don't. I mean, you can't enroll it if you don't know the passphrase, but
right.
Yeah.
So next time it pops up, I think maybe we should dig into it. Apparently, there's sometimes when I did some quick reading just now that I didn't realize it was related to that because maybe my lack of curiosity. I don't know. Sometimes just let the computer go and just do its thing. I'm wondering if anyway, it was uncertain, but I guess sometimes when they changed some kernel modules, that's what tripped that up. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be any kind of errant, like usually kernel module, like something you might have DKMS building and you never enrolled the key for.
Okay. So what if there's some modules that are just not running now on my computer?
Whatever third-party thing that's trying to load just ain't happening. As long as you have secure boot in, you turn off secure boot, that thing's just gonna run. Like whatever it is, malicious or otherwise, it'll run. So this is kind of one of those like security things that I think a lot of folks, especially who run like community distros and stuff, might not want. They might just turn secure boot off because it just gets in their way, right? Like if you're installing Arch from like an Arch ISO, you have to turn secure boot off because the ISO is not signed. Like no part of the ISO is signed properly. And you can sign your own ISO. You can do all that if you want, but just the vanilla one's not going to work. So you can turn off secure boot, install it, and then enable secure boot with your own signed key afterwards. But I would be curious if you did like a straw poll to see who has secure boot enabled and who doesn't.
I think that's a great idea.
All the folks in here, do you guys have secure boot enabled?
No.
I don't.
No, I don't have it enabled. I probably would if I was running maybe Linux Mint or Ubuntu. I think they use secure boot, but I'm running Arch, so definitely not.
I have secure boot enabled on my main with Tumbleweed and my laptop with Tumbleweed.
So
I'm guessing neither of those are NVIDIA, or are they NVIDIA?
Both of those are AMD. I do have.
Okay.
Nope, I don't either. Never mind.
So I guess Arch Linux can support secure boot, but it requires manual configuration.
It can, correct.
Okay.
Just as with everything with Arch, it requires manual configuration. That's sort of the thing you sign up for, right? But yeah, it's it can be done. Arch has a nice tool called SBCTL that's really, really good. There's plenty of great tutorials out there. There's really good documentation on SBCTL for enabling it, generating your cert, signing it, and everything. And it seems like a silly thing, but the low-hanging fruit of like browser extensions and the occasional desktop virus thing, that's kind of all right, but it's the stuff that infects your firmware and expects that's not going anywhere. The only way you get rid of that is to get a new machine. And a lot of state actors out there, and while I don't think I'm a personal target and I'm not super concerned about being targeted, it's crazy, man. And things are even getting even crazier each day. And I'm normally not a paranoid parrot about this kind of stuff, but
I am a
just a
paranoid.
little. Yeah, if anyone is a paranoid parrot and you're not running secure boot, you need to turn in your parrot card because you are not parroting enough.
So
Like,
I do. So on my framework here, I do run secure boot, and on my Atari VCS that runs secure boot, I can't turn it off. But so most things that I think anything that I take with me has secure boot, but like there's some things I leave at home I don't either doesn't have the option or I just don't have it enabled. But
right.
but I do worry about that because I don't. So I guess if secure boot's enabled and some state actor somehow compromises your machine, which I think that seems
Assuming they don't have physical access to it is what you mean. Yeah.
right. So what would be I guess does it truly make your system that much more secure?
It is significantly more secure. There are, if there are vulnerabilities in the UEFI firmware itself, that can, leave you open to an attack. So like, make sure you update your BIOS and, UEFI firmware as often as you can from your manufacturer. That's probably the most common way that you could be vulnerable is because of vulnerabilities in the UEFI firmware itself. But outside of that, like remote execution stuff to get into it is pretty difficult. And I mean, it's just security is a layered thing, right? It's just another layer of security alongside your firewall, alongside your any antivirus or just even things like SE Linux or AppArmor are nice layers, but like it's just another piece. And I mean, if you've assessed the risk and you think it's not that big a deal and you want to run without secure boot, cool. But I think it's kind of one of those things that over the years I've seen people who just kind of in Linux, because Windows people just boot Windows. It just works, right? Because the shim in there is signed by Microsoft and they don't have to think about it. But I've known a lot of Linux people who just turn it off, because it gets in the way. And I mean, I get that. I totally get that. You want to get a working machine and do your thing, but I don't know. If you're bored, you got some time, whatever. Maybe take a look at, if you're on Arch SBCTL, if you're on the other distros, check out the mock-util stuff. Hit up YouTube. I'm sure there's plenty of tutorials out there. If you got an LLM, it'll probably help you. ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, those will help you out. Like I just think it's something that'd be pretty useful. And Linux can be secure, but it can also be extremely insecure. So just depends on how you approach it. So yeah, fun. Anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments or insults, slurs?
I have
anything?
plenty slurs and insults. I have plenty.
I'll take my chances. I need a new machine anyway.
Right. Come on, infect this one so I can get a new one.
Well, I think, Colin, no offense, but like, I don't see you as a target.
Nah, don't really.
I mean,
nah.
even a bad state actor would be like, well, he's from Australia. Probably not a good idea to mess with him because he survived Australia.
It's not even just state actors though. Like these sort of drivers can be compromised because they're open source and people have access to the code. They can be compromised upstream. And
okay,
if you don't sign it, if you don't have a key for them and like they're compromised upstream, like if you're installing third-party drivers, NVIDIA, you're probably safe. It's from NVIDIA. Make sure it's from NVIDIA first off. But if these third-party open source drivers, DKMS stuff, do your due diligence. Make sure they're well vetted. Community support and stuff. And it can be helpful to kind of keep an eye on those third-party things, just from a GitHub issues or just kind of buzz thing. Just because of that, like we've seen in the recent past where open source projects have had malicious actors within the project compromise code, right? And so that can happen too. And you want to make sure that the stuff you're running is what you're running, right? And that that also presents the sort of danger in that convenience of the DKMS rebuild thing. But you security and convenience are always at odds, so you just got to pick your poison on that one. But I think it's a worthwhile. It's if you set it up once, you don't have to think about it, right? You enroll the key, you sign your stuff, DKMS redoes it. You don't have to think about it again. So it's not really a constant maintenance thing, but it's one less thing you have to think about.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm going to pay a little closer attention to it, so I think that's probably a good idea. I'm going to see when I see the mock key, I wonder what, dig into what it is.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
So, the firmware update tool in Linux, the FWUPD? FWUPD, is that what it's called? FWUPD?
That's how I say it. FWUPD, yeah.
Yeah. That downloads firmware from manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
Does that require the key signing, the enrollment, or how does that work? I mean,
so that is firmware for a device, not your boot chain.
Okay.
So
that's outside of the.
Yeah. So secure boot is basically it is trying to secure the part between your firmware loading. So like once your BIOS and UEFI have basically posted from at the end of that process to the fully booted machine is the idea. And when I say booted, I don't mean like your desktop popped up. I mean like the kernel modules, all that stuff is loaded. That process. And so it's that middle bit. So when you're using like FWUPD to update your BIOS, or your firmware on your like motherboard or something, that's the process before secure boot is a thing. Now, that's important to also know where that's coming from, because you're basically flashing over your manufacturer's BIOS with something else, and the Linux vendor firmware project or whatever, those guys are pretty good about verifying those things. But make sure that if you're concerned about that, then make sure it's coming from there, right? I personally a fan of just updating my BIOS from a manufacturer if it's an option. Just because I don't not that I don't trust the Linux for vendor firmware guys. Like they're great, and I've used them to update things in the past. Just that's sort of a very important little bit for me, and I really I don't want to impugn on it. I don't want to make it sound like they're not doing their job, but I'm still kind of iffy on that. I don't want that middle hand, is what I'm saying.
It makes sense. So then you wait. Just to be sure, then do you not trust the FWUPD then?
No, I trust it. Like I think it'll do what it's asked. It's like if I'm updating firmware on a mouse or on something like that, doesn't really bother me, right? I'll use it for stuff like that. But my own like BIOS and like Intel ME engines and all that, like I'd rather just like find another way to get that. Either many like third-party motherboards will support like BIOS updates through a USB stick or something like that. Laptops and stuff, usually if they come with Windows, you gotta kind of install Windows to do that. But I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's unsafe. I'm not saying it's bad or that they're there's some kind of shady folks. I'm saying I personally prefer to go to my manufacturer to update them. You are free to do that, and I don't think anything bad will happen. I'm just being overly cautious in my own way.
Well, it's how Framework recommends to update their BIOS. FWUPD, yeah.
Then that's cool. Like if that's their official way, then I would do that, right? But like when Dell tells me, "Hey, you need to like download our thing from us," I'll do that.
Right. Okay, I got you. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So like if FWUPD was like if I had a Sputnik laptop that's updated from FWUPD, cool. Dell did that on purpose. They didn't do that with Alienware stuff, so I'm not going to do that. Often it's not even offered to me, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're laying down. So I guess the moral of the story then here is maybe we should be.
Security goes beyond just your desktop OS and browser. That's kind of my main point. Not to make anyone super concerned or paranoid, But I think just adding a secure boot to your machine, to your setup, is just one less thing you have to think about, because that's covered.
So then, as an aside, when Skynet takes over, are they less inclined to be able to bust into my machine with secure boot? Or
They, unless the terminators have been signed with your keys or the Microsoft shim, which it could still be, if Microsoft robots take over, then you're kind of done. Everyone's secure boot's kind of done. But
okay,
as long as the terminators have not been signed with your keys, they will have no access.
at what point do I have to go back to an 8-bit computer to do my computing? I guess is really the question I'm asking.
I am pretty sure your 8-bit won't have secure boot.
It doesn't.
But I think if the robot comes on tape, you have time to get away.
Oh, that's true. I press play on tape.
Yeah, and then you have time to run. Yeah,
Okay.
while it loads.
What
That's
if
good
it
to
comes with a cartridge that you just like plug in back?
That's some fast access. You better have some Nikes on.
Yeah. That won't be good for anybody if it comes in cartridge.
Just get out your gaming controller and start shooting him, eh?
Well, it'd be this kind of controller.
So yeah, that was one thing, and another thing was I got a server from work that they provided me to like tinker with at home.
Oh, that's fun.
And that was a whole thing of troubleshooting and some problems on there. But aside the problems I had with it that I basically have to get a motherboard replacement for, I ran into an interesting thing of how I handle like data, not just data storage, with a sort of data storage scheme, right? So the question I'm looking at is like LVM versus ButterFS versus ZFS, right? Like those three as like options. And I was curious if you guys thought about or had any experience with those in terms of like local arrays, NAS kind of scenarios.
Yes, I do.
Elaborate.
So, well, since you're using a server, you're probably using a hardware RAID. Would that be accurate?
No, there is no RAID controller in there.
There is no RAID controller.
No.
All right. So I have also done RAID software with this MD ADM software RAID system. Have you played with that at all?
Yep.
Okay. Which is actually not too bad, really. So here's some of the things I would say about the software RAID, since we're going to talk about software RAID. One, it's very easy to set up for a static arrangement. So as long as it's not like on a removable device, like if it's like a USB, like a bunch of disks, it will not transpose to something else very well. However, I have found that if you do that, you can rebuild the array on another machine. I don't know if that's a concern of yours either, but the information, the MD ADM information is actually scattered on all the machines as well. So you can actually rebuild the array if you have to. If you absolutely have to, it is possible, not a problem, and it will
I
work.
was familiar with LVM being able to do that, like exporting the volumes.
I've not had any experience with LVM doing it, but I have just done ButterFS with MD-ADM, and that.
So the question is, do you need MD-ADM with ButterFS? Doesn't ButterFS have its own RAID 10?
Yeah.
Or like RAID 10, RAID 5, whatever like you need. I know it has its own. I just don't know like if that actually is using MD-ADM underneath. Or
It's using MD-ADM underneath. At least the OpenSUSE way is doing it anyway.
Okay.
So I figure if that's the way OpenSUSE would prefer to use it, and they're kind of the ButterFS.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they held the ButterFS flag when everybody was like laughing and pointing, and kept doing it and running, and then won. I figured that was probably the best way to go, and I did RAID 10 on how many drives did I have? I had 8 drives, 6 or 8 drives. Can't remember now, and so I had 5.5 terabytes of storage with the RAID 10, and I never had any problems with it at all. The only problem I had was I had to bootstrap it with another drive. Like I couldn't boot from it, I had to use it like a different drive to boot from. And that was really the only problem I had with that. But I mean, it was reliable. I never lost any. If I lost any data, I don't remember. So there's that. And the only reason I retired the machine is I wanted more space, and I was starting to have drive failures after 5 years. And in fact, that was actually the machine that I set up with Eric's help. I mean, he's not here right now, but back in 2019. So, and I just decommissioned it last year replaced it. So, and I used used drives as well. For what it's
Used
worth.
drives.
Oh yeah, they lasted 5 years.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
So ZFS, anybody? Nobody?
Now I hear a lot of good things about ZFS, but like there's OpenZFS, I guess, is supported. But actually, I don't even remember anymore. I read a bunch of this stuff a while ago, and then
That whole licensing thing's a mess, man.
yeah. So I just kind of avoided ZFS because the licensing thing was a mess, and I just didn't want to deal with it.
I don't want to run BSD.
I mean, it's kind of cool, right? Kind of.
I just don't want to run BSD.
Okay.
Nothing against BSD. It'd be another thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing to remember.
And so, like, professionally, when it came to RAID stuff, it's basically your host adapters, right? Your RAID controllers, those sort of things always handle that in hardware. And so professionally, I never really had to encounter this. Most of the storage stuff I've done outside of storage appliances that companies just set up for you is Ceph and Gluster.
Okay.
Those are more like distributed file system things. So like across multiple machines. In my case, like I most experience I had was with Ceph and like a hyper-converged thing. So where compute and storage were on the same boxes. And so you use the distributed storage to create basically object storage out of it. Similar to what you'd find in like a cloud provider. But so professionally, like I didn't ever have to hit LVM and these other things. And so I have experience with them from personal perspectives and like smaller deployments, but I just wasn't sure if anyone else had experience or thoughts on LVM versus Btrfs and such.
I didn't think.
LVM.
So LVM allows you to dynamically resize file systems.
It's basically dynamically reallocating file systems.
Okay.
So the advantage is you can have LVM so there's like 3 layers to LVM. There's the physical volumes or PVs. So that's the actual hard drive partitions that are LVM partitions. And then on top of that, you have VGs, so volume groups. And within those volume groups are LVs or logical volumes. And so those groups can be assigned certain PVs and then divided up into LVs. So you could, let's say you have a machine with 4 100 gig hard drives. You could have, one VG be 300 gigs, so 3 of those disks. So the PVs being the physical volumes and those being assigned to the volume group, and then you'd have another volume group that's maybe just that last 100 gig disk, right? And then within there, you would create logical volumes of various sizes depending on what you need. So if you need like a certain size var partition or whatever, and those logical volume endpoints are what's mounted. So when you usually see like /dev/mapper/ whatever kind of partition scheme, those are usually the logical volumes themselves are the mount points, and those logical volumes are then formatted with file systems, XFS or whatever it might be. Usually XFS on RHEL machines. That's why it came to mind. And so like those can be dynamically allocated space and stuff. And if you need to expand further, you can then add another disk to the volume group to then grow the LVM out if you need to, right? LVMs also can be encrypted with LUX. They can be LVMs can take snapshots as well, just like Btrfs. You can export LVM information. It's a really powerful thing. And Fedora used to be LVM, and then they switched over to Btrfs and sub volumes, which I think is a good move because ButterFS has other things like deduplication and sort of data integrity things that LVM
Compression.
may not offer. Right.
Snapshots.
Compression, right. Snapshots LVM does, but yeah, so there are other like features that I think are an improvement. I would argue that sub volumes are harder to work with. At least maybe that's just my old man, brain thinking like stuck in LVM mode, because that's been around forever.
I think that's still universally accepted. That is less. It's harder to work with, but
right. It's
I
one
don't.
of those things like if you set it up really well from the beginning, you're golden.
Mm-hmm.
But you really have to make sure you get that right out of the gate. And LVM I feel like is a little more forgiving in that way. But yeah, it's still way simpler than setting up a Ceph cluster.
So I guess for me, like the whole sub volume thing, I don't fully know even what those
so it's
are.
Actually the same idea as the logical volumes on ButterFS. So your sub volumes within your ButterFS, so like your whole disk, let's say you have a terabyte disk, might actually be one ButterFS volume, right? Like one big partition. And there are sub volumes within that are then mounted to mount points, whether they be root, home, var, whatever you might need to mount them to.
Right.
And those sub volumes are basically logical volumes within ButterFS, so they're sub volumes, and they can have their own properties of sort of like I think they refer to them as quotas. So like this can only take up this amount of space. When you take snapshots, you specify snapshots for a sub volume, not the whole disk. So if you only want to snapshot your root and not your home drive, because you don't want to snapshot your Steam install, and then you would specify that. So it's a subdividing of a logical subdividing of your data, even though they're actually on one big partition, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, I got it. Because I was a little fuzzy, like what's the difference between sub volumes and just a directory? I mean, in my mind, it kind of was the same, but that makes sense. They can actually define different properties for each.
It's like on a file system level rather than a directory tree level. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I think the sub volumes I have are boot, which I think makes sense. Actually, it's a boot grub i386 and a boot grub x86-64. I don't know why there would be two different ones there. A snapshot, home, opt, root, /root, I should say, SRV, user local, var, and var lib machines. So
right, and it also allows you to do things like more like granular control over write privileges and things like that as well. Sort of mandatory access control type things like SE Linux or App Armor can handle like different rules for different sub volumes. You can, it's like you have like the user local and var and all that separately. Like var, it would be, I don't know if OpenSUSE does it, but it would be prudent to put a quota on var to prevent log spam from, taking up too much space, right? LVM would do that by specifying the /var assigned a logical volume is only a certain size, right? It's a similar idea, but putting a cap on how much var can take up so you can avoid var log from filling up and crashing your thing because you're out of space. But you also don't want to take snapshots of var. Why would you do that? So you separate it.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't actually really dug into the whole file system thing, but it seems like, I mean, and again, I don't, I mean, I'm not much of a file system nerd, but I do think like
I am.
I do think ButterFS is pretty cool. So I guess you were correct. It does have built-in RAID functionality.
Yeah.
So 0, 1, 10, and then 5 and 6, but although they claim it's stable.
Historically, 5 and 6 are unstable. I don't know if that's still the case. It's really hard because there's a lot of old data on that one. I don't know if I would love to see current data on the integrity of 5 and 6 in ButterFS. It's one of those things, I'm sure we all see it, right? Where like this one idea or this one case happens like 10 years ago and it just never goes away. Like it might actually be different. It might actually be solved and not a problem.
Like KDE is bloated and slow.
Right, exactly. And so like in the like communities like group think, it just sticks and just stays, and it's like it's not true anymore. It may not be true. I'm not sure about the Btrfs thing, but you gotta get past that part, right? But yeah, they do have their built-in RAID stuff, and my issue is, you know, how portable is it compared to the LVM, right? Because LVM's been around forever, it's been used forever, and so I feel like it's a little more of a tried and true thing. Not that
Mature and
Btrfs is
stabilized.
bad, but like, right. So LVM support is going to be everywhere, right? And Btrfs isn't necessarily everywhere, and so like Rel doesn't support Btrfs.
I know that Facebook uses it for their servers. Not that we're saying, not that they're the gold standard for anything at all.
Right.
But
I mean, they got solid engineers if that site's doing that kind of traffic.
it's true. And so I know, I guess they're one of the major contributors to it, but I don't know what RAID levels they're using and working on. I would imagine.
Right.
So here's what I do know. One of the issues with RAID 5.6 and Btrfs is that because of the way the copy on write works, that apparently it's slower. That there's a little more overhead with a 5 and 6.
Right.
And so I guess that. But if you're using 10, you don't have that same problem.
So what if you just use RAID 5 and disable copy on write? Maybe that's not an issue.
Maybe you shouldn't do that.
Because you can run without copy on write. I mean,
it's true.
Then I question why you're using Btrfs if you're disabling copy on write. But
right. Yeah.
I mean, data integrity and other things, sure, but copy on write is kind of essential to that. Another thing Btrfs does that I think is really cool is there's like a Btrfs send thing you can do. So you can actually take a snapshot and send it to a remote, like send that snapshot to a remote destination and then like receive that snapshot later. So like you can like kind of make a snapshot, send it off to like a NAS or something and like let it just kind of sit there. And if you need to restore your stuff, you can just like Btrfs receive that snapshot back in. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's actually really neat.
There's some really cool stuff underneath. And like, I know like most people don't get into the stuff. I get that. Like, it's not something you run into, but like, man, there's some really cool tech in there. Like, it's really neat. It's the kind of stuff I live for.
So supposedly the snapshotting feature in Btrfs is much lighter weight and efficient than LVM.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I can definitely agree with that. And the deduplication and other data integrity things that Btrfs does means that your snapshots are probably more robust than LVM snapshots as well.
Yeah, it could be. I couldn't say.
So like Red Hat, so Rel, as I mentioned, Rel doesn't support Btrfs. They had a preview of it in 6 and 7, but in 8, 9, and 10, they've removed Btrfs support. They don't even have a kernel module for it. And so they've instead went with a strategy of a thing called Stratus. It's their like kind of file system management layer. So they still have LVM underneath, but on top of that, they have this like Stratus storage thing, and it's supposed to bring a lot of the advantages of managing storage like you would something like a distributed thing, but also kind of in the way that Btrfs is managed. And I don't have any real experience with it. I've only kind of just seen it from afar. But I was just like, the guys over in Fedora are using Btrfs just fine, just saying.
Yeah.
It's like Stratus just sounds like it sounded like a stopgap for them. I could be completely wrong. This is entirely my opinion. But like it feels like Stratus is one of those things that like they weren't ready to put Btrfs in, so they had to come up with something to duplicate a similar thing because ZFS is taken off and Btrfs and all that. And I would predict that in the next, Rel 11 or 12, maybe they'll put Btrfs. I don't know. Like I don't know if the Stratus product has really taken off as much as they might have hoped. Is what it is. I think their big focus is on like OpenShift and OpenShift Vert and stuff like that. So it's a totally different thing now, but it's just, yeah, that's a thing. Red Hat Summit was fun.
Were you there?
I got to see it from afar. A bunch of my coworkers went. I was not around when I was not at the company at the time when they were planning that trip. So
okay.
I didn't get to go. Also, my mobility issues lately wouldn't have been fun. But I got to see streams and talk to my coworkers about it. So AI.
There's a there's a meme I saw. It was like a Family Guy meme of it was a cake and Peter's shoving it in I don't know if it was Lois's mouth or somebody, but it said the AI is the cake, big tech is Peter, and then the public, us, would be the
Lois getting the cake shoved. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
I feel
little
like
bit
that's
of that, but
yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel about it. It'll settle out just like blockchain and cloud and everything
any
else.
number of things. Yep.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with cloud. Yep, absolutely. Everybody,
Cloud this.
all these companies just poured all this money moving just legacy infrastructure into the cloud as if like that was going to magically make it better, and it's like,
And then they
you
started moving it back.
morons. Like, oh yeah, hey guys, have you seen my Tomcat app running in this VM in AWS? Like, what are you doing,
cool.
man?
Neat.
Yeah.
That's fun. Well, hey, thank you for that. I know I like I like some of these like deeper nerdy discussions into things that maybe I don't like. Like if I talk about these at work, they're gonna look at me and say, "Well, will the lights keep blinking?" Well, yes.
Well, yeah, of course, right? Yeah. They will blink twice as fast. That's what you gotta tell them. Just like,
they'll more reliably blink. How's that?
yeah.
They'll
blink to
but
the beat of Darude Sandstorm.
but one of these days, I'd like to have like a hypervisor discussion. I don't know how many people care about
I'd
these
be down
things.
with that. Yeah.
And just that'd be I would like to do that. It's like an open mic night or a news thing. Maybe if it wrap into some news or something. But yeah, no, I think it's
love
neat.
this like super in depth stuff. So I'm always for it.
So anyway,
So
but thank you for
PikaOS.
that. So PikaOS. So we should probably get to the straw poll. If you have not yet done the straw poll, what was your experience like with PikaOS? I did kind of cut it a little bit shorter for reasons. So thank you for. There's a word for that, but I can't remember what it is. Anyway, thank you, Adam, for sharing some of the stuff. I know we like.
Always.
It's really hard to like have the conversation like over Telegram when it's like the super nerdy stuff, because like I have so many questions and then I'm distracted by life things. So it's like that's a good Linux Saloon discussion, from my opinion. So anyway,
On you,
Sounds
Adam.
good.
I know that I think judging by the chat and Colin, so ext4 is probably everybody's favorite here or something like that. I'm guessing, except for
Yeah, I
Dale.
haven't
Dale
really-
uses Butterfast.
Not much time to look into these. I've sort of installed ButterFS, but I didn't really understand it, so I didn't really know how it worked properly. I really haven't had time to sort of dive into it. There's there was another OS I was using that explained the differences between, I think it was a website or something, I can't remember, ZFS and ButterFS and XFS, I think was another one. And
Yep.
they explained the difference between how they all work, and sort of still went a bit over my head. So I just stick with ext4 because that's what I know.
And then you have RiserFS if you want to go back 20 years.
Yeah, no, I don't know anything about that one, to be honest.
Well, I hear it's a pretty killer file system. Boom.
It is to die for.
Didn't they recently remove that from the kernel?
Yes. Or I think it was deprecated and there was no more work being done on it. And I think that I think so. I think it was a topic here in Linux Saloon.
Yeah, they killed it.
Well, it's going to happen now or later. I mean, it was killed because it wasn't being used. So
They're making room for the new file system. What is that thing called?
Bcache.
Bcache. There we go. Yeah.
BK.
No, that's the other one. Yeah, Bcache F or something, FS. But yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. I don't know though. I don't think they're getting along with Linus Torvalds though.
I think so. Yeah, there was some drama there about
Oh,
like how they submitted things. They're like pretty big drama, but I think it's worked out now. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I guess it's.
It seems like people have been like still like aggravating Linus Torvalds because like 2 weeks ago he did another stupid thing. I don't remember what it was, and Linus Torvalds was about ready to pull it again from the kernel.
Yeah, it's been a few months. There was
No, the big one was a few months ago. There's
Yeah, oh,
another
okay.
one 2 weeks ago.
Oh, well, I missed that one.
Really, Linus Torvalds got really PO'd.
There's a YouTuber, Brody is his last name, I think. I can't remember his first name.
Brody, Robertson or
Robertson.
Robertson,
Yeah. So I think
He's from Australia.
Yeah, he's from down under, so his toilet flushes the other way.
That's a myth.
I know, but I like it. I want it to be true. I don't care if it's a myth. I want it to be true. But he actually did like a really good breakdown of it, and I really liked it. He did of the disagreement. So
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Bcachefs will be great. I guess we'll find out. I know that there's like some time ago, it seemed like there's a lot of momentum behind it. I don't know what happened to that momentum. So, but anyway,
I don't either.
let's go ahead and move on to that straw poll on. If you haven't done so already, go knock that out. Since I stalled a little bit longer on your experience with PikaOS. Eris, did you want to do that?
Okay. Let me refresh one last time. So the question was, which best describes your experience with PikaOS? And the number one answer with 34% was didn't have enough time, busy with work, busy with life. Followed by 24% did not have a good time with it. And then followed by 10% other, 10% Tux Penguin, and the rest all got 5%. It is amazing. It is good. It is okay. Not interested in this exploration and not interested in doing explorations in general. And as far as replies, somebody said, I tried it, but their eyes wouldn't work for me. And then somebody said same for me.
Yep.
Yeah,
That was my experience. It didn't work. The ISO didn't work.
Yeah,
all right,
same for me.
So I guess then that means that we need to go ahead and get into the discussion about it. I was actually really excited about this, but let me go through the rules first. So the intent is to talk about the different aspects of the operating system and discuss the experience from using it. It's supposed to be a discussion that should be objective and constructive, and try and remove any non-objective pieces of this because we don't want to be inflammatory. Because this is a passion project, a labor of love from somebody, so let's not poo-poo on it. So we want to highlight the positives, but not ignore any of the lowlights either. So it's a labor of love and I want to try and be keep it as positive as possible because I'd like to. I personally super appreciate the work that people do to create a thing, and I'm a big. I don't ever want to stifle creativity and creation of neat things. So anyway, a quick little thing about PikaOS. It's a gaming optimized Linux distro based on the Debian Sid, designed for performance and ease of use. It comes with Steam, Lutris, and Proton pre-installed, powered by a custom CachyOS kernel for top-notch gaming. With desktop options like GNOME, KDE, and Hyprland. I guess Hyprland is not a desktop. I don't know. I'm going to call it desktop. Plus the user-friendly pikman package manager. It's great for both newbies and power users. However, it's legacy BIOS only, no UEFI support, which can make installation tricky on modern systems. So I guess let's dive into the features and such. So first, who got it installed? Anybody?
Nope.
I tried, couldn't do it.
Eris, you got it installed. I appreciate that you got it installed. I tried on 4 different ISOs and on virtual machines and on real hardware, and I couldn't make it go. It said it was non-bootable drive. What did you do to make it boot?
I first tried to change it from BIOS to UEFI, and I think the third option, I think I wrote that in Telegram. The third option on Vertman, that's the one that worked. Let me see. I think I said that.
Is that the Q35 firmware you're talking about?
Yeah, the drop down for BIOS and UEFI. I picked the third option, and that's the one that worked. Yeah, the third option of UEFI. I don't remember what
Indeed.
exactly it was, but it's the third down. It's like BIOS, then it starts like UEFI, and then some other one. And I think that one. And I
Like
also
a
noticed.
OVMF? I don't know.
I don't know. It has like a path. I think gives you. It's kind of weird. Let me see if I can log into it. Anyways, I also discovered that I tried installing the system, and I only gave it like 2 gigs because I mean that's what it does by default. And as I was looking at the screen with the license agreement, it just like made the panel go away. I think it crashed, and then I couldn't go any further. So I gave it like 4.5 gigs. And apparently, once you had the installer and the going and the system up, it uses like 1.7 gigs. So 2 is pushing it because I think I did get out of memory error. And then after I got to that part, and then after I was done, like almost installing it, then it said it requires 30 gigs to install. So
Nice.
I had to change that again. Yeah.
Alright.
Let me see.
So I'm looking at the options, the chipset option. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. Let me see.
Okay, I only have two options. I have Q35 and i440FX. Do either of those sound right?
Let me see. Where am I exactly? Because I know when you do a new machine, it says like you want to configure it, and it gives you that option right there.
Yeah, it's OVFM is the OVMF, and you usually have OVMF secure boot as well if you want to run secure boot VM. You might have to install those if you don't have them, but yeah, I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
So the chipset's OVMF I have to look for?
Open Virtual Machine Firmware, I think is what it stands for.
Okay.
It's like a open UEFI thing.
So, but it says on the site it cannot support UEFI. So I'm super confused. Sean.
Yeah. I think that's the problem. And so that's the only reason why, yeah. But I'm looking here on Burp Manager just to see like how I would do this, because I remember there is a way to change that.
So
I just don't.
So when you name the if you're using Vertman and it says ready to begin the installation and you name it, there's a little checkbox in the middle that says customize configuration before install. So you check that the checkbox, and then there's a drop down here for it says hypervisor details, and it says like chipset Q35 firmware, and it says BIOS UEFI, and I picked the one that says UEFI X8664 slash US share US slash shared slash OVMF slash OVMF underscore code underscore 4M sec boot dot FD. The other one didn't work. So
Okay. How did
That's
you
the one that
find that as the solution? I guess is my.
because I figured that I think I don't know I think I read somewhere that it didn't work with BIOS, and then I started playing with the BIOS because sometimes it works with distros. It requires like a specific firmware or something because it doesn't for some reason they don't work with all of them, I guess sometimes. So I just figured that's the way to do it. So it worked.
All right, I'm going to look again here. So not BIOS, but EUFI.
Yeah. It's like I said, there's a little checkbox right
Yep.
at the last step before you name it, and then it says chipset. It says hypervisor details, and it's chipset and firmware, and there's a drop down there, and you can call it. And then I picked the one that ends with secboot.fd.
Guys, I have a question. I believe that PikaOS is like a gaming-oriented distro, right?
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if like trying to install it in a VM is not necessarily the best case.
Yeah, kind of missing the point. Yeah.
Well, I I tried on hardware too. So I tried installing it 4 times on hardware and
Yeah.
6 times in VMs and trying different chipsets and whatnot. But I stuck with BIOS because I tried UEFI as well, but I did BIOS because it's said in the installation portion of it on somewhere here. It said if you go into the getting started, it said so it tells you how to boot over. It says once you have burned PikaOS to USB drive, boot you. Let's see, where's the point here? It says you'll also need to ensure secure boot and CSM are disabled if you're in your UEFI settings. Okay, so I totally misread that.
Yeah, so as per my discussion earlier, that's an immediate no from me.
I'm just looking at the frequently asked questions on their website, and it says Intel, Haswell, and later AMD Ryzen and later earlier CPUs will not be able to boot the OS. So there must be an issue with. That's why. Maybe if you're not running NVIDIA, it seems like it's very NVIDIA focused. Because when you look at their downloads, it says choose this one for NVIDIA and later, or the other one if you got before that or something like that.
The only difference is the NVIDIA driver is already pre-installed in that ISO rather than the other one that's not.
That's correct.
So if you go to boot it, it's going to expect you to have NVIDIA hardware. If you get the other one, if you have AMD or Intel.
So Sean had his hand up, and then he put it down. I don't want to be rude to Sean, so sorry. What is it you were going to say?
That's okay. You can be rude to me.
No. I don't want to, because then I have guilt, and I don't want that.
Okay. So I did get this installed in a VM, and I tried the KDE, GNOME, and Hyprland versions, and I would describe it as being respectful that somebody had put their time into this, and it's a labor of love. Kind of a thoughtful mess. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just not consistent. It's like the Hyperland version just totally ignored my keyboard layout. It asked for it, kudos, and then just said, "Nah, you're just on plain old US QWERTY keyboard layout," and I type into Dvorak, so that's weird. So you have to then log back into the Hyperland version and then update the configs for Hyperland to accept your keyboard layout. Kind of like not a good experience from an end user. And also I had inconsistencies with the GNOME version where okay, I was going through their installer on, it looked like Calamares, but a customized Calamares, and you could select your keyboard layout, which it did actually accept and honor in GNOME and KDE. But it also gave different time zone designations, and one of them was your U.S. Mountain or U.S. Pacific or whatever, rather than going to a city and saying I'm on that city's time zone, which is weird to me. And then would not honor that time zone when you reboot it. So again, kind of weird. Yeah, I think they put some thought into the tooling around it, the gaming aspect of it, but not the end user experience. That's like my 2 cents.
So were you following their just looking at the frequently asked questions again, were you following what they had for Hyprland version of Pika as super enter for terminal, super D for application launcher, and then there's many more in the config?
If you're going to be doing a tiling window manager, I think you should have something up on the screen when you log in that says,
Yeah, I
these are the
agree.
defaults,
Yes.
use them
Yes.
or change them, but these are the defaults. And a go away kind of button where you're like, yeah, I know, go.
Yeah, I agree with that. Shouldn't just be on a frequently asked question, I must say. Should be somewhere in the system itself to let you know, for sure.
Yeah, but like I was able to get things going. Like I was able to like super enter and like type the name of the application that I want to run, and I'd get the terminal, it would run. Hopefully, I would not close the terminal, because that would kill the application, that sort of thing. And if you're like, you could like have the argument of if you're running window manager or compositor, I guess is the more correct term, that you should know that you are not a noob and should know to look at the docs. But
yeah,
it's a nice touch, just like has something up in a conti or a terminal opens and says, "Hey, here are the defaults, and let's go away." That sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep.
That's not there.
Especially for a window manager, because everyone has different defaults for window manager, don't they? Because there's so many different window managers.
It depends on which window manager you're using, what the defaults are, and
so
on and so forth. And just like, hey, in case you didn't know, here they are. They're like just like there on the side, whatever, and have an easy way to bring them up and dismiss them until you like get things configured for yourself.
So I think,
yeah,
I think this is one of the problems I believe with digital distributions, or digital distribution of software, is, do you remember like back in the old days when you could, it had like a little, this is Barbie horse adventure here for the PlayStation 2. Why have it by my desk? Let's not worry about it. So they had a nice little, this is how you do the game, or this is how you do the software. A nice little manual like tells you how to do things. And I kind of feel like maybe that's something that's kind of lost today in our everything is so digital. Does anybody kind of feel like that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
A box copy of something. There's just something.
I think it's really important with like compositors and tiling window managers, if you're using it as a standalone, to have that instruction up on the screen, if nowhere else.
And it tells you the features on the back and all kinds of things.
And if you really liked it, you could like send away for the official print version.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be cool.
But we would never end up.
I would like show up in the mail, and you'd be like, "Wait, I already redefined them. This is useless." It would go in the drawer, and you never use it again.
So I didn't try this thing out, but I'm just looking at their website. So they've got all the different editions here, the 3 different editions. 3 of them are for NVIDIA's, which are RTX and GTX 1650 or later. But if you've got GTX 1080 Ti and earlier, you should use the regular ISO. But not only that, when you click on that, it just downloads it immediately. Whereas they probably should have like another link where it takes you to the download, and any information required for that could be on that link before you hit the download button. So that could be another thing they could do, probably. Just put some transparency out there for each different desktop, especially for the problem that Sean was having as well, just something, just food for thought anyway, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. What do you got there, Mike? Spaceman.
Good evening, everyone. I want to follow up with what Colin said just now. I think a lot of their problem is they're not very clear on how they describe their distribution, how they point you in the right direction for getting it up and running. I think they could really use some help on their website mostly. I think that's the biggest problem they have. All these other issues are, you see, everybody had to kind of go and look around and find all these little bits of information that you're trying to put together to get this thing to run, to boot. And I think if they focused on getting the information in a good readable format that was actually helpful, that would help a lot. I tried installing it on. I have a 5th generation i7 test machine. First, I tried installing it on VirtualBox, and that was just a no-go. It just would not do it, even with a lot of resources and with the EFI. And then I tried installing it on a 5th generation i7 box with 16 gig of RAM and a NVIDIA controller, and it wouldn't install. Same thing. So I just gave up after that. So I mean, I hated it. It looked like it would be an interesting distribution. So, and also, I want that copy of WordStar that Ron has.
Yeah, that's actually, for me, it's a relatively recent vintage, version 6. My 3.3 is at my office, so yeah, it's running on a CPM box.
That's awesome.
It's like an RPN calculator on my desk. Nobody wants to use it because there's no equal sign. Same thing applies to my desktop because it's quite often running CPM. Doesn't look that great because it's the machine is sitting with LCD panels. So
I was just going to ask if it were you running Gem on CPM?
I tried back in 1980, and no, the graphic thing didn't do it for me. It was just not right. Something wrong about it. I just need text. So yeah. Yep.
Now,
give me my 80 by 25 and poke stuff into cells, and I'm happy.
So, Eris had been sharing in the Zoom chat. I really like the default wallpapers in PikaOS. Like just looking at them, I think they are really cool. I mean, like because they're kind of cartoony and fun, and they have chickens, and I like chickens, so it works out. But they're just fun wallpapers.
What I find interesting is with this reading from the top of the web page is that it's based on Debian, and they have cherry-picked packages which are up to date on a Debian base. So that I find interesting. So they're actually updating certain packages to the latest release, which is interesting.
Franken Debian as a service.
I'm not sure how they're doing that, but I don't know if anyone figured out how they're doing that, or whether they have their own repository or something like that.
Well, it's Linux. You can do whatever you want, really.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
They do have their own repositories.
Right.
And whether I trust them or not is kind of questionable.
Well, that's understandable. So, for those of us that did get it successfully installed, so Sean and maybe just Sean, Eris got it going. Is it something you think that you'll stick with, continue to use?
I kind of have my questions about these gamer centric kind of distros is like how well do they work as daily drivers? And based on what I'm seeing with Pika is like it doesn't really work for a lot of people as a daily driver or even installing at all, you know. So I don't think it would be something I would be like, yeah, go install this and be happy. I'd be like, go install this and see if it works.
I think it's increasingly difficult now that SteamOS has been released. Because, I mean, I think that's going to be a big draw card for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, the only thing it falls short on is the NVIDIA support. But if you have like AMD hardware, especially, like yeah, SteamOS is just straight up going to be the better choice.
So I know what you're saying, but I think I prefer Bazite to SteamOS because of the additional lickies and chewies they put in it that makes my life easier, like Tailscale. So do you almost think that maybe SteamOS is kind of like a meh at this point? Or am I way off on that? I don't understand anything.
I think in the future, this is my prediction, and we'll see if I'm right, but I think in the future, when the anti-cheat problem becomes solved, it's going to be solved by, surprise, the signed kernels and stuff that Valve will be providing that Easy Anti-Cheat and BattleEye can rely on as a target for their anti-cheat to run on that won't be modified by randos to cheat, right? I mean, people still cheat with EAC, let's be honest. But the point is, like, I think SteamOS is the only OS that I can think of that might actually have that sort of clout to allow the anti-cheat stuff to work. And if you end up in the scenario where SteamOS is the place you can play Fortnite, or SteamOS is the place you can play Marvel Rivals, or some other easy anti-cheat or BattleEye title, then Bazite and the others don't even matter, because unless you can get that Valve signed kernel, you wouldn't be able to play. That's the only reasonable way I can see anti-cheat being brought to Linux, and that would be the place to do it.
I agree with that. Yeah. But I actually think if anyone were to do that or to be able to do it, it probably would be Bazite because there's a lot of eyeballs on that right now. I mean,
they would have to. So Epic, and like the EAC teams and the BattleEye teams would have to coordinate with them to ensure that nobody could modify their kernel for cheating. So there would have to be like business deals and contracts associated with that. And I don't know, I can't speak for them, but if I were doing a community distro like that, I don't know that I would have.
Bazelite's not a community distro.
It's a company behind it.
No, it's a UBlue. So Universal Blue is not a distro.
You're missing the part of the sentence that was important. It was the fact that it's community driven, not by a company. A company that can then enter into business contracts with EAC and BattleEye to ensure that the environment is as it should be. That's the key part. The word distro was not important.
No, I got you. But like that actually could probably happen though, because this is like their whole ISO is generated through a Docker image, so they could easily do that.
Right, but we're talking about like, it's not even about a technical thing. Like technically, a lot of places could do this. It's more about business. It's not necessarily about, because Easy Anti-Cheat and BattleEye want to have their kernel level anti-cheat in the kernel. And they want to ensure that that kernel is exactly what they are agreeing it to be, and that would involve contracts and agreements and stuff that Valve as a business would have an incentive to do. But a community project may not have the lawyers and other folks to go over that and enter into that sort of thing, right?
Maybe.
I think though, this is just my thought, and I tend to be optimistic, about things. But it seems like if Valve were to have a approved Linux kernel that has the signed drivers and everything else, other distributions or projects could offer that a same or similar signed kernel.
And that's where the business agreement comes in.
Yeah, right.
that they would likely, so they have like agreements with, because Windows kernel is not open source, right? So many of these companies have relationships with Microsoft to an extent to enable that sort of low level code, right? And there are agreements to that. It's not even just a matter of like, well, the kernel is okay, so like, why don't you put your stuff? But the kernel can't expose their proprietary in anti-cheat stuff and all of that. So like, it becomes another thing. Like, it has to be a runtime running in that. It's beyond just a simple like, well, the kernel didn't change and it's immutable or whatever, but it's the business part is the hard part. The technical part can be done. Like right now, easy anti-cheat works on certain games. It works on certain, same with BattleEye. But to get those like absolute assurances that their billions of dollar games like Fortnite are not tampered with by cheaters, you need those agreements, you need that contra, you need that money assurance that comes with that.
I think they should just ask people not to cheat.
You're
real
funny,
politely,
Eric.
right? Just real polite about it.
Yeah, just
Please don't cheat.
guys, don't cheat. You know,
Like, come
let's
on,
not do that.
guys.
That would only work in Canada.
Be a nice person, Eric.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, if they charged like $10 or $20, like some minuscule amount, who's gonna like? There might be a few people who download. Most people just pay the $20. But when they're like asking, like, I don't know what some of these games go for though, but sometimes I think they're a little ridiculously priced, but whatever.
Well,
This
Fortnite's
is
free to
not
play.
a-
It has the in-app, in what are those called? In something purchases, in-game purchases.
Microtransactions. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't
Things
get
might
it,
not-
even with their anti-cheat, my son has downloaded a pirated version of it, so like I don't think that this is a bit, like this whole anti-cheat, I don't think is as big of a deal, should be as big of a deal as they're making it out to be, because my son uses Windows, he has a pirated version of it, just like everyone, a lot of other people, I think.
I think the biggest thing with the anti-cheat is really just cheaters ruin games. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like you just can't enjoy it whenever someone's hacking and stupid stuff, wall hacks, aim assists. Like it's just obnoxious. And so the game would not even sell if they didn't include some kind of anti-cheat, no matter how
that's
no matter how rudimentary or impossible it is to actually stop every single cheater. And the truth is that Linux provides the perfect platform for cheaters because it's so hackable and so easy to, relatively. And like Adam said, without that signed kernel that would make it more difficult, maybe not impossible, but more difficult to do, they're just never going to support Linux as a platform.
Yeah.
And
when so Respawn, who do the guys behind Apex Legends worked on Linux for a long time, and they eventually just stopped allowing it to run on Linux because they were overwhelmed with cheater bans and stuff, and they had a huge drop. It was like I think it was like 2/3 of the cheaters disappeared the moment they stopped supporting Linux. Like it was a gigantic drop in cheating when they just stopped supporting Linux, because it was trivial on Linux to cheat compared to Windows because of because of the way easy anti-cheat or whatever they had. I don't know if they had one. I think they did, but anyway, the way it worked on Linux was super easy to circumvent because of the way Proton and all that other stuff works. That they had a huge reduction in cheaters when they turned off Linux support.
wow.
It's sad.
Yeah, and I mean,
Like it was in the hundreds of thousands in a month. It was a lot.
For the honest people, you think, well, that really sucks because just because I'm on Linux, I'm being punished. But from a company standpoint, what do you expect them to do? They can't not do something.
Right. It's a free to play game. And so anyone can just make an account and go and cheat on it, right? So if you're the way you make money is to keep players playing your game, and because it's free to play, as long as they play, they'll buy your cosmetics and your battle passes and whatnot. And if you allow just cheaters to ruin that, people who actually stay to pay money will go find the other game that doesn't have these cheaters, and they'll pay money there. And so, and then the game just dies because just too many cheaters. I mean, there's a few examples I can point out, and Tarkov is the main one I can think of, like where cheating is so out of control that the game is basically unplayable.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It just is. But I mean, I guess what do you even do about it though?
I mean, they did. they stopped supporting Linux, and it solved the problem for Apex. Until they can get that guarantee that their anti-cheat can run on these games appropriately and that things are not modifiable, they are locked down to an extent that is acceptable for them, they won't put their cash cows like Fortnite on there. They can't risk having hundreds of thousands of cheaters, if not millions, given the size of Fortnite. All these people rolling in there easily cheating with the way things are. They can't afford that hit in money like that. That would just kill them.
Right.
And even all the kids that play, that'd just be ruined for them, like.
Yep. And with free to play, where you can just keep creating more accounts, with basically impunity until you can get banned. But I mean, what difference does it make? You just create a new one, and you're using a VPN or using some way to, anonymize your IP address. And there's really not a lot of recourse other than to ban that single account, which then is easily circumvented. So. No easy answers, folks.
Nope. People need to be.
But SteamOS is awesome. So that's that.
I think I have to. I mean, I know this is kind of stating the obvious, but SteamOS and what Valve has done, especially around Linux, is just Proton and all the rest of it is truly, when I think about the last decade of technology, it's so damn impressive to me. To see what they've been able to do. It is incredible. I mean, it is absolutely that one company can have such an impact.
Yeah. Like if you had told me this in 2016 that they would have what they have now, I would have called you a liar, because I'd have been like, hey, look at those Steam machines. They're sure doing well, huh?
Yeah.
And I just been like, this is it's absurd. But yeah, it's reality. Yeah.
Gaming is such a huge industry. I mean, it's the biggest entertainment industry. There's nothing bigger than that. And so, it's not just, oh, great, some people can play games on Linux. Like it's transformational, in a lot of ways. So
yeah, it's really big. And like a lot of the work that's gone into Proton and stuff has also inspired other platforms. Like CodeWeaver supports, this stuff on the Mac right now. And there's a lot of that similar technology being used on the Mac for bringing games there. And even Apple sort of copied it and made their game porting toolkits the same idea. And it's so suddenly, you don't need Windows for most games, just the multiplayer stuff mostly.
I was just going to say that. What is the single, most used excuse for going and using Windows if you're a Linux user? It's
gaming,
gaming, unless you're running specialized hardware or something like that,
right?
That you need Windows. But I mean, the idea that Linux has sort of wrestled, control of that, because basically Microsoft owned that, you know what I mean? And it has democratized it in a very large way.
And Valve with the Steam Deck device is it's not just about providing the product. It's about showing everyone, hey, look, this is possible. This is a thing. You can play games on Linux. I mean, so many people play on a Steam Deck and they don't really care that it's Linux, but they're playing on Linux. All the stuff that they put into the Steamo and into the Steam Deck, anti-cheat stuff we just discussed notwithstanding, does trickle down to desktop Linux, to the point where people who play on PC, when Windows 10 dies or when they just get mad, they have a place to go. They have an alternative.
Yeah.
and I love it because it's always good to have choice.
So has it gotten to the point for you, Adam, that you will see how it works on Linux first and then go to Windows if it doesn't work well, or do you just?
Yeah, well,
it's not
depends.
that. Yeah.
No, it depends. So if it's a game that runs well on Linux, then I'll just play it on Linux, just like it's whatever. If it runs well, usually the reason I would choose Windows over Linux is actually like modding and stuff like that. A lot of the mod tools and stuff are still now. That being said, I have something to say about that, but a lot of the modding tools and other stuff like are more supported on Windows, or if there's like some new GPU feature that NVIDIA is only rolling out on Windows that I want to check out. But like I'm just as happy playing the game on Linux or Windows for the most part, because most of the features that I expect to be there are there. Ray tracing, DLSS, ray reconstruction, frame gen, all these like advanced new things with the new hardware, they all work on Linux. They work just fine. And often, like, you can find plenty of people doing benchmarks and comparisons, and the delta in performance is not as much as it used to be. It's oftentimes very close, like much more than even just a couple of years ago. And that makes it pretty awesome. There's still some things like HDR support still kind of booty cheeks on Linux. It's getting there. It's really close, but it's still kind of butt. But I mean, like HDR, I feel like is the only thing missing. Like variable refresh rate works, like the FreeSync stuff, like that works. Like all these features that would have been like draws to Windows do work on Linux now. The main thing is the anti-cheat stuff and modding. Although, if you're familiar with modding in games, Nexus Mods is like the big name in modding. Like it's the biggest site with all the mods. They're developing a new app, and you can use it now. It's like an early access kind of thing. But they're developing an app that does work on Linux, and it supports Cyberpunk and Baldur's Gate 3 and a couple other games already. And you can just download mods from their site and install them easily. Like it's a whole mod manager for Linux games. And they tie it right into their Proton versions and everything. It's like
it's awesome.
So like that's a solved thing, or like quickly being solved thing. And so like then what do you have left? Well, if you have Game Pass, I guess you want to play the Game Pass games on PC. That's still on Windows, obviously. But like unless you want to play them on cloud, I guess. But yeah, the list of reasons to play on Windows is dwindling, and I feel like the reason to play on Windows is not so much about the games, but it's the other stuff. Like if you're on Discord, the Discord overlay is really nice on Windows and not really a thing on Linux. And or if you want like GeForce Experience, or they don't call that the NVIDIA overlay, NVIDIA app thing, like you want to easily record with that stuff. Like there are options on Linux, sure, but they're not as easy as to use as that, or so those kind of things still draw you to Windows, but the gaming itself is not really as big a draw unless you play competitive multiplayer stuff that needs anti-cheat. And if I play those, which I don't, but if I play those, I just play them on console. So
I got you.
Yeah.
So what do you think the chances are 15, 20 years from now that they're building games to Wine and not to any specific PC platform? Just a curious question.
If DirectX is still the target in 15 years, I'll be very sick to my stomach, to be honest.
I don't know, in 15, 20 years, how things will even be. I mean, like
I have to think
Minority Report.
that virtual would be bigger by then, but
well, think about it. With 15 years after Wine was announced, it still didn't work worth a damn.
Well,
15 years after Wayland was announced, I think.
Now, I say no to you, sir. I was playing World of Warcraft with the OpenGL backend and messed up textures long before Wine was considered good.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah,
it's like going to Undercity and like half of it doesn't have color. So yeah,
you and me both.
I was playing Diablo 2 before it was considered good too. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
Oh man, my cursor went out of the window again.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those situations where that organization had a very small development team and they had to pick their battles, especially since they had a paid product.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they were really focused on. And it took someone like Valve to come in and look at what they had and see that the foundation was there, but it just needed that. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Valve is a pretty substantial, development team.
Very well.
And, so without that kind of push and that sort of support, it just would have. They could have never gotten it done. Code Weavers just couldn't have ever gotten that done. It just
right.
And there's no what would have been their their reasoning for doing it. Frankly, I mean, it's not like they were setting the world on fire with Code Weaver, with the licenses and stuff like that. So Steam and Valve, that was a direct investment in their future. And I'll give them credit because I think a lot of people were like, you're never going to pull this off.
So something I do want to bring up, that Valve is a big, well-known name that put together Proton, but I remember the components of Proton before they were Proton. I was tinkering with DXVK before there was ever Proton. This was an amazing tool that could translate direct. At the time, it was only DirectX 11 calls. It couldn't do 9, 10, 12, none of that. It was just DirectX 11 games, very few. It was pretty sketchy, but like it was really fast compared to like anything Wine did out of the Wine D3D stuff that Code Weavers have been developing and everything. Like, not even close. The guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but like the guy who put together DXVK like started a huge thing, and then from DXVK there became D9VK, and that was for DirectX 9 stuff. And like I played Guild Wars 2 at the time, and like D9VK allowed me to play Guild Wars 2 at like a solid frame rate, and like with like all the graphics features were there. The only issue was stuttering because like shader cache stuff hadn't been figured out yet. That was something that Valve later fixed with Fossilize and all that. But I remember these are community-driven pieces that Valve later either hired the people or like, kind of worked with them closely. And they built Proton from these community pieces. And so like, that's not to say that the Valve developers don't do a lot of work. They do. But what they did is they packaged it and gave legitimacy and gave a verification to it. But all of these components were originally community-driven components. And that's important to recognize, that while Valve gets a lot of the credit because Valve has productized it and marketed it and brought it to the masses, the community members who created these components are amazing people, and that's the people that we really should be thanking, is those folks who built DXVK and VKD3D and all these other graphics things, and the people who work on SDL to bring input stuff. Like, there's so many community pieces that get shoved into Proton and shoved into these subsystems that without all those community members, like, because it's easy to see that Valve was the push, but Valve was more of the mindshare push. A lot of this technology was built by these people, and they pushed it. Like, when I saw what DXVK was capable of when it first came out, and it wasn't anywhere near what it does now, but I was like, holy crap, you mean like this actually runs well? It's not Undercity with no color? Like, it actually works?
Yeah.
And like, that was impressive to me. And I remember just sideloading that into like Wine, and like that was awesome. And I'm like, this is gonna make a big difference. And then it did, right? But it was these people working on it that really got it going. And it's easy to lose sight of that, but as somebody who was literally there, like testing the earliest versions of this stuff, I remember this.
This is a dumb, smart-ass thing to say, but they pulled an Apple, is what you're saying.
I don't think they Sherlocked it, no, because like, no, because I believe some of those people actually went on to work for Valve on this stuff, but
gotcha.
It is a community thing at first, yeah.
Well, it is about that time. Quickly, housekeeping. So next week and the week after, there won't be a Linux Saloon because I'm going on vacation.
Oh, boo.
I know.
Congratulations.
So I'll be driving next Saturday, and then the Saturday after that, I'll be driving home. So no Linux Saloon for the next couple weeks. Don't try and break my house. I have a house sitter. So just FYI. But when we come back on the 14th, we're gonna have a news flight night. So bring your topics and or any other cool things you might be doing in Linux, because I'm all for that. I like cool things. Right, Mike?
I may have a double secret item to show off when you get back.
I'm hoping. So I'm really hoping. But yeah, if you have any like really cool projects you've been working on, I would love to feature those on the community Freeport. And I know Mike's been working on something. He shared a little bit of it with me, and I'm really excited to see what more comes of it. So yeah. All right. So it is that time for last call. I don't know if anyone had anything real quick they wanted to say, something they want to plug, or some excitement in their life in the world of tech they wanted to spout off about.
Yeah,
now's your chance. Do it.
My last video that I did, I installed Tumbleweed with Agama, and then I installed Tumbleweed with Yast. 2 separate videos. I figured out in Kdenlive how to put them sorted together side by side in a video. So I basically made a Yast versus Agama install video.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's pretty cool, because by the time that I'm done in inputting stuff in Agama and I hit the install button, Yast is still initializing. It's that much, but at the end of the video, I shouldn't say because I need to keep you cliffhanger, but Yast actually wins the install, even though it took that much longer to initialize. And for the life of me, I'm trying to figure that out. And both of them were the net install. So theoretically, they're pulling from the same server, pulling in the same bits. Theoretically. But Yast actually, like, by 4 or 5 minutes was quicker. I can't figure it out. Unless there's some underlying architecture of Yast that has a lot of those bits already running and doesn't have to download. That's the only thing I can figure.
That'd be cool. I'll definitely check that out. Is it uploaded now?
Oh, yeah. I put the video in the Zoom chat.
Okay, cool.
I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty cool.
I was amazed at the result. I really was. By 4 or 5 minutes. Now, you think OpenSUSE is throwing new technology at this new Agama installer, and granted, it's only like half done, so it's definitely a work in progress. But new technology and initialize that much faster, you would think it would get done at least that much faster, and it didn't.
Interesting. Well, cool. Thanks for that.
That's
so, Gene, I appreciate that. Gene, to Linux. Nice of you to turn on your camera.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. I was just going to say thank you for doing these. I've been watching for a long time, but I'm usually busy on Saturday nights. So I have never gotten a chance to watch live before. I didn't have really anything to contribute to the earlier discussion, but just wanted to say I appreciate the show and enjoy it.
Well, I appreciate you lurking. That's nice. That's nice. Lurk anytime. You're free to lurk or free to join, whatever you like. I think we're a pretty nice bunch here. Sometimes Eric has to pull me aside and talk to me about my attitude, but you know, it's only once
for that.
Yeah. And it was twice a week. Now it's like every other week. But yeah, so thanks for being here. And Vince, thank you for being here. Ron, it's always good to see your Canadian face. Sean, your avatar. I'm imagining that's how you look in real life.
Thanks,
and everybody. Yeah.
I've got something to point out, if that's
yes,
okay.
Yes, please. Yeah, absolutely.
I heard about a self-hosted app this past couple of weeks called Sterling PDF. So if anybody has ever had any need to manipulate a PDF, whether it's to, say, remove a password, add a password, redact something, Sterling PDF is absolutely awesome. Now, I sort of have a little box that I self-host a few things. And there have been some things that have been absolutely critical to me. So things like Image for photos, Jellyfin for media, and now Sterling PDF is in my toolkit. It is that good. I'll put
He's not lying. It's amazing.
I'll put the link in the chat here.
So Vince recommended it to me as just to like check it out, and I loaded it in the Docker container just to check out, and I immediately had a use for it because I had to upload a document for work, and the upload limit was 6 megabytes, and the PDF was too big. Sterling PDF allows you to reduce the file size, not just reduce it like in general, but like they have an auto reduce where you specify the file size you need, and it will reduce it in quality just to match that file size you need. So I put it like 5.5 megs just to give me some wiggle room. Perfect. It was amazing. Such a good tool.
I'll have to check this out. Thank you for that. That's why I like this show. You share things.
Well, the only reason I boot into Windows is to run my very expensive Adobe PDF editor. So this is good to know. Do you know if
Say bye
the
bye
only
to
reason
Adobe.
I use a PDF editor is to extend sign here lines to something a bit longer, and to change a font and some text just to highlight something.
I haven't tried that, but I would absolutely think you could do this.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
It has a ton of functionality.
I use something called PDF Studio that I run locally. I paid for it like a few times over the last 15-ish years, and it's been working pretty well for me too. It works on Linux. But
PDF Studio?
Yeah. Although I think they might have changed their model now, so I'm not sure on that one anymore. But more to follow. This is interesting to me. So thank you, Ron.
And one last thing. My wife got me a copy of Microsoft Gardening from the 90s. And I still have yet to launch that, but I definitely... It looks to be Encarta, but gardening only. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Yes, I think we should have a demonstration.
Yeah, that'll be exciting.
I mean, I'm interested in seeing it. If even if it's something to poke and laugh at. So,
as a real test, we need to actually see what the garden looks like in your yard.
I live in an apartment, so no yard.
Just got a flower box,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
That makes it even more hilarious.
On the windowsill, that's fine. All your herbs, whatever those herbs may be, I'm not gonna say, but
See that's the funny part about getting the gardening stuff is I have no garden or any sort of plant thing, and that just makes it even better. I can learn about gardening.
well, you do now.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, I got a CD. I don't have any plants to go with it.
I think gardening is more difficult than raising chickens.
I think I might just like plow a plot in the courtyard and just see what happens.
It takes a lot of time.
We do both. We have chickens and a garden.
I've got 8 raised
chickens eat
beds,
the
and
garden.
this year, 2 of the raised beds had rabbits' nests in it. And yeah, that means we gotta hang tight and wait up before planting. And yeah, the dude I have weeding the beds, he kind of freaked out, young guy, and he freaked out when he was raking away, and that little warm, fuzzy-looking things start moving under the rake.
That can be
Yeah.
disconcerting for sure.
I remember
Yeah.
a thing that could get rid of those rabbits, but it said like front towards enemy on one side. But you can look for those.
You know, what's weird is I have chicken wire around these things, and I don't know, they seem to find a way to migrate through. They're not very tight though.
They
the
can
wires, so-
dig down. You have to go several feet down with chicken wire to keep rabbits from getting in.
Oh wow, that's a commitment I
And I'll-
cannot make.
And I'll also say that chicken wire does not keep raccoons out. They will cut it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's dedication.
Yearly, there's warfare at my backyard with raccoons. I've got 5 or 6 traps, and I would set them out. It seems like kale with a little bit of peanut butter on top. They love that, and that's how I capture them and take them.
Good to know.
parking lot of my local Costco because my wife says, well, it's across a river. Let's work with that. They won't make it back here if it's across the river.
The raccoons I catch won't be back. That's all I'll say.
Oh my God. The look of vitriol in their faces when you go. Sometimes I don't want to take them away that night. Well, that night is like 2 or 3 in the morning. It's like, no, man, I'm going to take them away at about 7 or 8 in the morning next day. And the look on the adults especially, I see you, I hate you, I will take you.
Can you imagine if you didn't have that cage between you and them? And
I know. And then the worst part is when you take them to the Costco parking lot, well, you got to open that door. Gingerly.
I'm sorry, but squirrels are the worst because
ready to run.
I have had squirrels actually steal my coffee while I was camping, and that is actually a heinous sin.
Wow, that's impressive.
I agree with you.
Unacceptable.
That's personal right there.
Yeah, that's unacceptable.
It is.
I've got raccoons, possums, squirrels, and the squirrels are by far the worst.
Yeah. I would keep the raccoons for their skin, but that's just me.
So I know this is all Linux related.
Just like look up at you with these eyes and go, "Help me," and you're like, "Hell no." Squirrels are like, "I'm taking this. Fuck off."
That's funny. Like when you reach down to grab a squirrel, like they kind of like gnaw on your finger or something, but like you don't feel it.
So Rudy's Retro Intel says, I plant hot peppers all around my garden edge. Animals don't like it or the smell.
Yeah, I've tried that. I grow a lot of hot peppers, man, and just on the ground and then in the beds themselves, and no one seems to care.
Yeah, marigolds.
So
I'll be like, "Hey, give me some of those hot peppers."
We can keep this conversation going afterwards. I got a thing I got to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this thing out. I know Shaston, he has some things on YouTube. I got a website called CubicMate.com. I also do a podcast called Linux Out Loud. 2 great co-hosts, Matt and Wendy. Linux Saloon is part of the Tux Digital Network. Check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com. I want to thank you all for your support, however you do it, being a part of the conversation, both the Zoom meeting and the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact, like you, GNU2 Linux. I want to thank everyone involved in making Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy our technology. Linux truly puts personal back in a personal computer. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yas.